This week we'll have a fun and fascinating topic, I think, and really intentionally delivered for the purpose of really helping and assisting you with something that could radically rearrange and transform your whole life. Not much, really. And what I'd like to talk to you about is the wonders of coffee. So I've got to wet my whistle a little bit on today's topic. So once upon a time, many great stories begin that way. Let's go back 300 years, shall we? Roughly to the year 1700. There was a great mystical, magical power available to mankind, but mankind couldn't use it, had no access, no understanding, no practical application of it. They could have used it, but they didn't know how. And that great mystical, magical power that was available, that was unavailable to them, was called electricity, right? So the Romans didn't have electricity, the Greeks didn't have electricity, et cetera, et cetera. But they knew of it. They had inklings of it, lightning, of course. And as we kind of got toward the 1700s, humans began to play and experiment. Of course, this was the Enlightenment, the age of reason. And humans had been fascinated by electricity. And then we begin to hear of apocryphal stories. Ben Franklin flying a kite in an electrical storm. It's likely that he didn't do that, although he experimented with electricity as well as just about everything else. If you ever want to read the biography of a fascinating human, read Ben Franklin's. Anyway, and then we get to say the year 1800 and many more experiments and some inventors and scientists began to play with the varying substances that would, chemical substance that would produce an electrical response, and then toying with that. Another odd form of the source of electricity were certain fish, certain electrical eels and rays that could shock and kill other fish. And obviously humans had been touching those probably accidentally for hundreds of generations, and the feeling of electricity, the feelings of being shocked, static electricity, for example. And humans began to experiment more and more with that. By the early 1800s, batteries were being built of hideous, disgusting chemicals mixed together that were about the size of an entire basement that could produce just a couple of millivolts. But we were working on it. We were beginning to have access to this great power. And then it accelerated very quickly, and some geniuses came along who really were the forefathers, the progenitors of the electrical age. Faraday, Maxwell, a guy named Ohm. I always liked that his name was Ohm, O-H-M, it's named as an electrical unit now. It's also what we chant, isn't it? But they began to discover the principles and ideas and the mathematics behind electricity, and thus electricity, which had been potentially available to humans forever, now became available in practicality. Obviously, we know where we are today. We couldn't live without it. What's worse than walking into your house and flipping on a switch and the power is out? We just expect it to be there. It's the most natural thing. We scarcely feel its presence, but we sure feel its absence when it's not there. In other words, humanity, and collectively and individually, have gained access and learned to use a great power that was always available to them. Now, what I'm going to suggest this week is there's a deeper, more profound, more extraordinary, exceptional power that's available to humans that very few humans have learned to use in its most profound application. And it's a power that yogis call prana, P-R-A-N-A. Other cultures, civilizations have called it different things. It might be called chi, it might be called mojo, it might be called spirit, but it's the underlying animating power of the universe. Now, we all have access to it, but very few humans have actually gained it. Now, I'm of the opinion that in 500 years, and mark my words, that all of human civilization, if we survive, and one of the keys to survival will be learning to access prana, this great life force. In other words, electricity, as profound as it is nothing. It's zero in comparison to prana. In 500 years, prana, as the great yogis say, is infinite energy available in unlimited quantity that's everywhere all the time. The word prana in yoga, comes from two Sanskrit words, pra, and na. Put those two together and it means always moving. Prana is always moving. It's the life force. Now, modern scientists would dismiss and poo-poo this, just like modern scientists dismissed and poo-pooed this 300 and 400 years ago when speaking of electricity. Just because modern scientists say something isn't there doesn't mean that it's not there. It's just means frequently they're too lazy or too close-minded to experiment with it. But yogis have been experimenting with prana for thousands of years, and they invented the science called pranayama, which means being able to access, utilize, manage, tame, temper, and put to practical use prana, life force. When we individually learn to use prana, we don't have to wait for the collective to learn how to use it. We can learn to use it individually. And it's the great power of the universe with a capital P. We might call it God power if you want. I'm looking at religion and spirituality from an energetic aspect right now. Most humans run on their own power. In religious language, we might call this self-will or self-propulsion. When we learn to use and align with prana, big power, we don't have to use our power and struggle. We don't have to put up a sail and then go to the back of the boat and blow in it to move ourselves forward. We align with a power that's always moving, that never depletes, that never runs out, that's never variable. It's always moving and always available to those who find it. So this week, we're going to be like the Faradays and the Maxwells and the Ohms of the 19th century. We're going to learn to experiment and understand the principles and the practices and the benefits of using prana in our life. People that learn to use it get way more done with way less effort. And if we're ever tired or depleted or wiped out or burned out, it means we're running on self-propulsion, our own power, rather than using prana. Do you think there are advantages here? Stay tuned. We will explore this in depth all week. See ya.